Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for attending and make sure everybody gets back. I know we did have a problem with our live feed. That has been corrected. Our first panelist today is Ted Metz, and he is running for the office of Secretary of State here in Georgia. So with that, what I'd like to do is give Ted a chance to talk to everybody and tell him what he's all about and what he wants to do. Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you, OJ. My name is Ted Metz, obviously. It's T-E-D-M-E-T-Z. You can find me on all the social media channels with that name, T-E-D-M-E-T-Z. I am running for the Secretary of State in the midterm elections here in Georgia. And a little bit about me, my real name is Tecumseh Metz. And I was named Tecumseh after my grandfather, whose grandmother named him after her grandfather. So I'm like one of those thousands of direct descendants of the great Shawnee chief Tecumseh. So I actually am 1/8 Shawnee and 1/16 Cherokee on my mom's side. So my mic is dead, so we get to start over. Let's try this one. This one's not seemingly working either. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so starting again, my name is Tecumseh Metz. I am named after the great Shawnee chief Tecumseh. My grandfather's grandmother named my grandfather Tecumseh after her grandfather, Chief Tecumseh. I was just saying before the microphone dropped out that I am 1/8 Shawnee and 1/16 Cherokee. So I feel as if I'm part of the tribe. I always have felt that way. I have a different spiritual aspect about my interactions with the world based to, compared to most people. I'm highly tuned into, our mother and our great spirit. So I am running for Secretary of State in the state of Georgia in the midterm elections. I am running as a libertarian. I will say that I'm Reformed Republican. I started out as a Democrat, and after years of following them, I kind of got the idea that as an entrepreneur, I started my own business, that, Republican platform sort of like fit in better with my philosophies at the time. And now that I've outgrown that, being a libertarian is the place to be because it's all about freedom and liberty and freedom from government overreach. And I think we all suffer greatly from government overreach. So I'm running as Secretary of State because I feel as if I'm the only qualified candidate. I am an IT professional. I've been playing with computers since I was a child, which has been a long time, over 50 years now, since I started playing with computers. I understand, I'm a database administrator. I understand data. I understand how data is supposed to work. And I have been in the advocacy and activism space for election integrity here in Georgia for over 10 years. I started with a group called Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia, Voter GA. Garland Favorito is the founder, and I started videotaping him years ago. And the more I learned about how our electronic voting machines were not accountable to the voter intent level, I started to get really interested. So for the last, like I say, 8 years or so, I've been at the legislators, at the committee hearings, advocating for hand-marked paper ballots counted by human people at the precinct level, because all this computerization really turns your vote into what one of my professor friends calls a fractionalized, manipulated data point. We can't trust the electronic machines. We have the paper ballot records. Here in Georgia, we have been fighting for almost 2 years now to look at the actual paper ballots from the Fulton County election. We got the ballot images and found through the ballot image studying all the statistics and everything that we could get out of that there were 17,500 more votes cast in the 2020 election in Fulton County than there were ballot images. And under Georgia law, you have to have a ballot image to support a vote. So there's something wonky going on, and they won't let us see what's going on. So I'm running for Secretary of State to have actual free, fair, and trustworthy elections, because there are recent poll. Pew Charitable Trust actually did a poll that said over 59% of Americans now think there was some sort of a wonky behavior, anomalous behavior that occurred in both the 2020 and the recent primary election here in Georgia. It's just something's not right about them, and there has been plenty of research into the possible hack points in our electronic data system. There are so many different hack points and chain of custody issues with the actual ballots, the actual electronic memory cards. There's no chain of custody for those, so we really don't know, because once they go into the computer, they're no longer tied to a ballot, so they're easy to manipulate. And just as a SQL expert, database expert, you can look at the data and see that if the secure hash authentication for a ballot image is not the same timestamp within a couple of milliseconds of the actual ballot scan, it's not a valid ballot. So we have a lot to fight for in that, because I want to see free, fair elections. And since our republic, our democratic republic's foundation begins with a voter selecting their choice of representation, how can we be sure? If in fact, well, if it turns out that they are manipulating elections to put someone in there that they want, that's not a free republic. That's outright slavery. You know, it really is. So my whole intent is to make sure that elections are fair, free, easy to vote, hard to cheat. So going beyond that, I grew up in the Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force. He retired as a colonel. I've lived in almost every state in America. I've been around the world. I was in the Navy for 6 years. I pretty much spent my entire life as a Boy Scout. And the thing about being a Boy Scout back in the early 60s and up until the 70s is that they actually taught morality and a code of ethics and a code by which to live by, which today's kids don't have. You know, our oath was on our honor. I'll do my best to do my duty to God and country, to help other people at all times, to be morally straight, mentally awake, and physically strong. You know, nobody's like that anymore. They just play their video games and listen to whatever the media is spoon feeding them, their propaganda, to divide and distract us Americans away from sharing the love and the spirit that we're here to share. So it's all about distraction and division, and the rulers trying to overtake our free will, and I'm highly against that. So that's me. I'm just like a straight, honest guy. I always tell the truth to a fault. And at the point right now, I consider myself to be the least regrettable candidate for Secretary of State in Georgia. So this isn't a campaign event, but I would appreciate a vote.
Thank you. When you said that you're a Democrat and you're a Republican and then Libertarian, it kind of reminded me when I was a kid on a reservation. It depended on what church was there. Sometimes I was a Methodist, sometimes a Catholic, sometimes I was a Lutheran. Whoever had the best food for the summer. Ted, what I'd like to ask you about, it's called the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA. The Help American Vote Act of 2002 was passed by the United States Congress to make sweeping reforms to the nation's voting process. HAVA addresses improvements in the voting system and voter access that were identified following the 2000 election. In 2018, Congress appropriated additional HAVA funds for the states. One provision within the HAVA Vote Act allows for the use of funds to be used to improve federal elections. For example, in the state of South Dakota, HAVA funds have been used to help counties pay for early in-person satellite offices and ballot box drop boxes on or near Native communities. With that, I'd like to open it up to the panel. Kobe?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, OJ, and thank you, Ted, for being here and taking some questions. So the first one, if elected, would you support utilizing HAVA funds to establish additional in-person, early, and election day voting locations for minority communities, including Native communities?
Here in Georgia, well, this is the thing. HAVA is a national thing, and under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, Congress, the federal government has authorization to kind of dictate how federal elections go. So as far as federal elections go nationwide, I fully support that there are underserved communities that need to come up to parity with everyone else. Here in Georgia, we have 2,300 some odd precincts. We have 17 days of early voting. We have no excuse mail-in ballots. So Georgia isn't as much as a problem as the rest of some of the parts of the rest of the country. So I'm absolutely in favor of making sure that everyone has easy access to voting nationwide. So the answer is yes, I do support that part of HAVA. Now, HAVA, as you recall, was passed after the botched Bush election in 2000. And more or less, I look at some of the HAVA parts as a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, let's fix elections, when essentially it really is up to the states. And some states are not up to par when it comes to allowing people to easy access to the polling places. So, and on the one hand, it's a good thing. So HAVA does provide money for localities, local governments, to put in place improved voting access. But the other thing that HAVA also was supposed to do is to create a little authority to create labs and testing facilities for the electronic voting systems. And this is a problem right now because there's only one certified laboratory to test the electronic equipment. And unfortunately, in most states, there is a company called ProV&V who has not been certified. Their certification actually expired in 2017. And they're not a legitimate company, yet they're still contracted to test Georgia voting systems. So that part of HAVA, in that aspect, they need some huge improvement real quick. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ted, for being here today. My name is Erica, and I'm with 4 Directions Native Vote. I have another question for you. If elected, would you advocate that Congress provide additional HAVA funds to be used for satellite offices to serve as mirror election offices with the same days and hours as main election offices?
Here again, since it is somewhat of a state law issue, I fully support funding local infrastructure for ease of voting. I certainly support that. So I don't know if that's the whole answer or not. Is that a good enough answer, or do you want more?
Absolutely. I think that's sufficient.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ted, and just thank you for being here and sharing all of this with us. I'm Sandra with NCAI, and I wanted to know, if elected, would you support a review of how Georgia has previously utilized HAVA funds?
I'm all about the audit. Where's the money? Where did the money go? Follow the breadcrumbs. I know that we have a pretty good system here in Georgia. There are some underserved communities. Out of all of the voting precincts, generally speaking, they have about 1,200 voters assigned to each precinct. There are some precincts that have 7,000 voters assigned. And that's what we really need to look into, is to see how each precinct is serving the community, because we do know there is a problem in some communities being underserved with facilities to do that. One of the things that Georgia did, they actually enabled buses, like voting buses. They put the voting equipment on buses and can move those to where they need them. And that's something I'd like to bring up for the tribes. Maybe you could do a voting bus that can go out to the community instead of building a facility, just like drive a bus out there. But then again, some of the states need to have an expansion in their designated days of early voting, and I understand not every state has, the same number of early voting days as some of the states that have a higher percentage of Democrats in their legislature.
Actually, when you say about mobile voting and stuff, they have some of that on the Navajo Nation. And what they were able to do is they got outside funding where the election officials were able to purchase a bus specifically to utilize as a satellite office in some of the communities that didn't have access. So if elected, you can call Navajo, they'll help you out with that.
And then Bluebird Bus is my second call.
Okay, I guess that's about it. What would you like the voters to know about you as far as this election coming up, and you know why they should look at them casting a ballot for you?
Well, thank you for that. Did you skip question number 4?
Yeah, I did. There's 4. All right, I'll back up.
Okay, I just want to hold you to your feet to the fire here.
Okay. If elected, would you support the review of the declaration by Georgia that Georgia was in compliance with all the applicable federal election statutes?
That's one of the first things I'm going to do, because we are outside of many of the federal requirements for our voting system. You may or may not know that President Biden renewed an executive order declaring the state of emergency with our election systems that are vulnerable to outside and foreign attacks. Now that brings up 2 other items, CISA, which I'm sure you've heard of,
right,
and FISMA. FISMA is one of those things called the Federal Information Security Management Act. And because election computer systems are critical infrastructure, they are covered under FISMA, and our systems are not under FISMA compliance at all. So absolutely, I'm trying to do that right now before the election to demand hand-marked paper ballots, because our electronic system is not in compliance with FISMA, CISA, or several of the other federal requirements, including the FEC requirement 3.2.1, which says the voting system shall not err more than 1 vote in 100,000, and we have in some of our counties up to a 60% difference between the hand-marked paper ballot and what's recorded by the system. So I'm hoping, again, to make sure that we're in compliance with the federal laws, both post-election, in future elections, and prior to the midterms.
Well, now I know why you said number 4. You were ready for that one.
I like to do my research.
Okay, you know, I'll go back now. In closing, why don't you tell the citizens of Georgia and those, you know, watching throughout the United States and Indian country why they should vote for you?
Because first and foremost, I want to make sure that all of the applicable laws are enforced within our election system and within the elections. We don't have anybody right now that is actually looking at what the statutes are versus what they have done with their past bad acts. A lot of the problems that we have in Georgia with our elections is that we're not complying with the law. We're complying with things that are decided in courtrooms rather than under the legislature, because the legislature shall pass the laws that have everything to do with voting, elections, and such. So I want, again, to make sure that our laws are complied with, to make sure that voting is easy to do and hard to cheat. I also want it to be accountable. I want anyone to be able to go in and demand to see the paper ballots and be able to tally it for themselves to prove that the election results as reported through all the computer systems, that they match what the ballots actually were cast. Because again, our republic is founded on our choices by our vote. And if our vote is not going to the candidate of our choice, then we have a huge problem. So that's why I'm running. And that's why you should vote for me, to make sure that our elections are free, fair, accurate, and auditable.
Well, thank you, Ted, and really that was a wealth of information. I appreciate it. You know, I wish you luck, and any final thoughts before we go?
Well, I would like to say that I'm very thankful that you offered an opportunity for me to come and spread my propaganda. One of my websites is the Ministry of Truth, and my tagline is "Our propaganda is the truth." And again, I appreciate being here. It's nice to meet all of you.
Wopila. Thank you, Ted.